I know what you're doing. What you're doing is you're sitting at home pretending to review effectively and you're not doing it at all. You know that. You sit there with your textbook or your notes, or you sit and watch Heimler or John Green or whatever, and you sit there getting stuff into your head, but it all falls out and it's totally ineffective. It's common sense to think that the more information you pack into your head, the more you'll learn, but it's totally untrue. And for those of you who've been doing psychology and you still think that, shame on you, and you need to get better than that for the Thursday Psychology AP exam. So think about this. You stick huge amounts of information into your head. What's your short-term memory's capacity? You remember that it is a very, very small number of items. What you should be doing is not just stimulating your visual centers or whatever. You should be going through that super terminal of the hippocampus to make sure that you are encoding this stuff into your long-term memory. Because what you're doing by cramming is, one, you are not encoding stuff into your long-term memory. You are simply fooling yourself that you're doing a lot of work before, because you are exposing yourself to a lot of information, which you are not remembering. You know that. You try and do an enormous amount of work, and then a little while later, you wake up with the dog sitting on your legs, nice and warm on the sofa, with 12 hours having passed, and you've learned very little. And that is because you are not doing the right sort of stuff that will help you encode information into your long-term memory. And you know that. You just sit there and do it over and over again because it seems like a good idea. And then you get up, you go to the toilet, and you get a drink, and you make a snack, and you play another few games of Candy Crush. Shout out to Rajiv. And you are just doing things that are wasting time. So you don't have much time because it's a push week, and therefore you have to be effective in your use of time. Effective. So, you might have heard of active learning. You should have. If you've done anything on cognitive psychology, you will be aware that there are ways to get your hippocampus to stick things in to the neural pathways that then start to encode things in your long-term memory. And then you repeat those, and you repeat them, and you do it in a way that strengthens those neural pathways in a way that you will be able to recall those pieces of information when you get to an AP exam, such as a push. But it works for all the others as well. Now, let me see what good things there are to do. Firstly, pretest. You know where to find the questions. AP Classroom is a wonderful place, and I know a lot of you have been avoiding those questions in there for I don't know what reason. I don't care what reason, but stop it. So you can also go to Khan Academy, which has a large number of questions of the MCQ persuasion, which are often linked to the kind of stimuli that you will have to face in an A-push exam. Let me see. You go through that. You don't concentrate on the things you learn, because what you tend to do is go, oh, I got 72%. And you leave it at that. What you need to do is concentrate on the things that you got wrong, because those things that you got wrong are the things that you don't know yet, despite having exposed yourself to loads and loads of information which went into your short-term memory and then promptly fell out because you forgot to encode them into your long-term memory. Now, didn't you? The next thing you can do, it's called stop and restate. If you've watched any videos on active learning, you'll know that this means that at a certain stage you stop because you're not being effective anymore in trying to cram 423 pieces of information into your brain when it can only take 9 plus or minus 2 pieces of information until you then encode that into the vast, limitless storage of your long-term memory, whereupon the only difficulty is to get it out of there. The retrieval is the problem, not the storage capacity. So stop and restate. So after a certain amount of time, you stop. You turn away from the video or the textbook or your notes or whatever, and you restate in your own words what you just learned. because you haven't learned it yet, but you will if you stop and restate. It's good to recite it, it's good to say it out loud, as long as it's in your own words, as long as you're not trying to recall the exact wording that the source that you got the information from presented it in. An even better way to do it is to handwrite it. Handwrite it in a way that the information was not originally presented. So it's your own words. So you've processed it, and you keep doing it. The next thing to do is, when learning, when watching one of those, I don't know, a Heimler video or an oversimplified video or a John Green video or wherever you're getting your stuff, the textbook, for example, at some stage you stop and you write out questions. While you are learning, while the video is going, while you're looking at the textbook, you write out questions. And don't do the what, when, where questions, because they're just recall. They're just things that aren't going to be tested in the A-push. You want the how or the why questions. So, you see something, you don't know why FDR decided that setting up the CCC would be a good idea. You write, why did FDR set up the CCC? And then, after a while, you look up the answers, and we are in the information age, so you're not short of places to look these up. ChatGPT is usually a reliable thing for these commonly asked questions, and then you get the answer, and then you write it out in your own words. And this is a lot better than just reading or watching passively. So you end up going to sleep and needing another piece of chocolate. You know yourself. Next thing to do is, obviously once you've looked at the pieces of history, the pieces of work, the questions that you didn't know how to answer, then you basically do the practice questions, and you start looking at how you can answer the questions that are presented in the myriad of places where you can get those questions. But you keep doing the active learning. You don't read it and pretend to your sadly deluded selves that you're actually going to remember every little factoid of the 122,586 little pieces of information that you just read in chapter 92 of the textbook. You won't. You have to do active learning. You have to do the read and recite. And once you've done all of these active learning techniques, the writing down of the active learning questions and the answering of those in your own words, then you can go to a practice test. You can get practice tests in a lot of places. A lot of really good questions are in the actual practice tests that are in the, they're just online somewhere. You can get them off AP Classroom, or just write A-push exam 2023, and you'll find those there. And then you don't do those things, those tests, while everybody's there with the television going, with Taylor Swift's latest emotional bust-up playing in your ears. You don't do that. Remember the idea of context-dependent recall. If the stuff's encoded in your long-term memory, if you have done your job and not just crammed, then you actually have stuff passing through the hippocampus into your long-term memory. You have been strengthening those neural pathways with continual repetition in slightly different ways in your own words every time. Now you need to retrieve that stuff. Now, you know the sort of thing where you go into a room and you think, what was I doing here? What did I want? I went into the pantry to get, and then you go back into the kitchen and you remember baking soda, and then you go back into the pantry and you want it. And that's context-dependent memory. So the idea of that is when you're doing your A-push exam, you will be in a position where you can't get up, where you can't snack continuously, where you can't just go, I think I'll get some baking soda from the pantry. So, when you are doing your practice exams, then it is a very good idea to do those in as close as possible to the situation that you will find yourself doing these on Friday, May the 10th in the morning. And so you don't want to have the radio playing, even though that's the way you study best. You don't want to have online poker going on your screen. You don't, all of that stuff that you convince yourself you can do. Don't think you can concentrate on two things at the same time. That idea of multitasking has long gone. You're simply focusing on several things in quick succession and, of course, reducing the amount of effective study time you do. So, you won't be able to replicate exactly what's going to go on in the exam room, but, it will be quiet. You'll have an exam paper, so maybe print it out. You will be handwriting stuff, so have a pen and paper. And you will be in a situation where you've got a certain amount of pencils, you'll have a desk. Try and replicate that. If you try and do the kind of trial exams in your usual study environment, Starbucks with lots of your friends throwing things at you, it won't be effective learning. So please, my final message here is don't cram. Don't sit there passively expecting to absorb understanding through your eyes and ears. It doesn't work. You actually do have to use large, complex sections of your brain, which you avoid if you're simply cramming or watching Heimler or listening to John Green gabble on in his very entertaining way. Have a beautiful AP period. Ciao now.